What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the next part in the Build a Spotify app series. In the last part, we wrapped up the customization of our search result table view cells. In this part, we're finally going to get into building out our playback UI, where you see, the play button, the pause button, all that stuff. So if that all sounds good, make sure you start by destroying the like button down below for the YouTube algorithm, opening up the workspace that we have going for our project. I'm also going to open up the simulator. And first things first, I'm just going to hit the run button here to make sure we didn't break anything since we last visited the project. Looks like it compiled and is launching. Give it a second here. Looking good. So you guys have noticed that across the app, we have songs. So here on the browse, we have recommended music. If we come into any of these in search and we tap into one of these, categories and go into a playlist, we have all these songs here, so on and so forth. We want a universal way to go ahead and trigger the player to, present. But instead of playback being the focus of this video, we're first going to build out the player and the UI. So the presenter for the player, you can imagine we don't want every single controller to have the responsibility to go and present the player. What we're going to do is we're going to introduce a new type of object into our project called a presenter. And I'm going to create a new group for it, just like we have for all of our other top level objects. And this one is going to be called, if we create a new file in here, I'm going to create a Swift file, and we're going to go ahead and call this, you can call it player presenter, but we're going to call it, let's see, playback presenter. And essentially what we're going to do is have a class in here, final class playback presenter. And you can either use it, via a singleton, a shared instance. You can say, shared and have a single instance of it, or you can just create static functions directly. We're going to create static functions directly. So we're going to go ahead and say static func present. We'll say present, or we can say start playback rather. It's probably a better term. Start playback. And the first parameter will be from view controller. And this will basically be from which view controller do we need to present. We'll need to go ahead and import UIKit so we can pass in a type of UI view controller. So that's the first parameter that we're going to want. We're also going to want, what thing do we want to play? And that's going to be with either a track. So we'll say a track is a single audio track. This is basically the view controller requesting to play a given track. Or the view controller could also request to play two other things. And that could be present the player and start playing an entire album or start playing an entire playlist. And what I mean by this is when you come into our app, and we tap into, let's say, one of these albums, that's not a good example because it just has one song in it. This one has a bunch of songs in it. When we tap on this big green play button here, we want to not only pass one song to our presenter, but we want to pass in an array of all the songs in this collection, which is called an album. So we have two functions here, respectively, for albums and playlists to handle that. Now, once we get this function call here, what do we actually want to do? Well, we want to go ahead and instantiate the view controller that's going to actually play the music, which is a player view controller. We created this pretty early on in the series. I believe there's nothing in here just quite yet. If we jump into it, it should be totally empty. We're going to delete this auto-generated comment code it gives us. And I'm just going to come in here and say view background color is going to be system background, just like that. And let's go back to our presenter. So what we're going to do is we are going to say player view controller, just like that. We're also going to go ahead and say view controller present VC animated true. Completion is nil. So now what we want to go ahead and do is, well, let's first actually check if our presenter is working. So go ahead and hit Command B, make sure you're compiling. And let's actually hook up the various places around the app that need to go ahead and present this. So the first one that comes to mind is on the browse controller, or home, whatever we called it, under core. When the user taps on that bottom cell, recommended, we want to go ahead and ask the presenter to present. So you'll find here, let's find the function for did select item, which is this one here, recommended track. And recommended track, what we want to go ahead and do is get the model out and pass that in. So we can actually say that the track is going to be, let's see what we did up here. This is going to be, I guess we called it recommended tracks, or perhaps not. Let's go up to the top and see what we actually called that array that holds those tracks, something along those lines. Looks like we called it just tracks. So we can actually say is let track is from tracks. Let's get index path dot row. And what we can say now is playback presenter. We want to start playback from self, which is the current controller that's requesting to present. And we're going to pass in the track that we want to play back. It's also important to understand that this model works of having a single presenter because you can only have one song in the app playing at one time. So go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. And notice when you tap on one of the songs down here now, you'll see another view controller presented. Now, we don't actually have the UI set up for this now, but we will momentarily. Now, we want to also hook that up for the playlist view controller, as well as albums, as well as search results. So let's do that super quick. So we're going to jump into other for our controllers here, and let's find the appropriate controllers that we want. So we have playlist view controller, and there are two places we want to hook it up in here. The first place we're going to hook it up is did select item at index path, which is right here. All right, we have a play song. We even commented it out there. So let's go ahead and get the model out. So here, I'm just checking how we hold our models. Looks like we have a view models array on here. Let's see how view models are created in our playlist controller. Let's see. Looks like once we get our data back from the API, we convert all of the tracks into view models. What we also want to do is hold these tracks directly. So we can go ahead and say, so actually we don't even need to hold these tracks now that I think about it. What we could do is get the nth track for the playlist. So what I mean by that is when we select one of these rows, we already have the index via the index path dot row, and we can get the track by saying playlist, which we do hold on this controller, dot, let's see, dot items. I think it's items. Does it not have tracks in it? If it doesn't have tracks, we'll need to go ahead and actually save them. Looks like it doesn't actually have tracks. So what I'm going to do is we're going to come to the top of the controller here. And right next to view models, we're also going to go ahead and say tracks is going to be a collection of tracks, audio track, if I can spell it correctly. And essentially what we'll go ahead and do is we will say here self dot, let's try that one more time, self dot tracks is going to be model dot tracks dot items. And the benefit of this now, let's just make sure that it's all working and compiling. Items should be an array of audio tracks. Looks like these are playlist items. And this one should have a track in it. So let's see. We have a playlist item. Looks like that one. Let's see what this model actually is. I don't recall what it was when we created it. Playlist item. Looks like a playlist item has a track inside of it. Okay, that makes sense. So from this items, we can go ahead and say that this is compact map $0.track. And what we're now saying is this self.tracks is an array of the actual tracks that are owned by this playlist. So now when we actually go ahead and select, one of the cells in the playlist list, we can say the track that we want is essentially from tracks, get the nth track at the given index, just like that. Then we can say playback presenter. We're going to say start playback with from self with the given track, just like that. So this one's looking good, pretty simple. Now, one thing that I just realized is if we go back to our playback presenter, the other two functions that we had created take in an album and a playlist. Now, these models don't actually directly hold a pointer to, their items that are inside of that album. We actually call an API to get that information. So instead of passing in an album, or instead of even passing in a playlist, what we can do is let's consolidate this into one function that takes in an array of audio tracks. Because at the end of the day, that's really what a playlist and an album is. It's a collection of multiple tracks. So let's go back to our playlist view controller, and you'll notice we also had implemented a user goes and taps on that big green play button. And we basically want to send the collection of tracks to the player presenter. So what I can now do is say playback presenter. We want to say start playback, and this time it'll be an array of tracks. And this is simply going to be tracks, which is an array of audio tracks in order that we have saved on this controller. So pretty simple. So let's go back now to our album view controller, and we're basically going to do the exact same thing there. So let's see where we actually fetch the tracks in the album. Looks like it's right here, and we're saving them to view models, but we also want to save the tracks directly. So we'll say self.tracks is model dot tracks dot items, which is an audio track array. Let's go ahead and create that tracks collection on here. We'll say private var tracks is a array of audio track, just like that. Let me make sure the syntax highlight picked it up. Yes, it did. And now what we can actually do when a user taps on one of the rows, very similar to the playlist controller, from the tracks, we're going to get the nth track. We can say playback presenter, start playback from self, and this is going to be track singular. And we're going to pass in the given track. And the last one here in this controller is going to be very similar. Instead of having a single track, we're going to say that this player or this call wants to present a playback of a collection of tracks. So that takes care of both of the playlist and albums. The last one we're going to go ahead and do is hook up the search results. So if I search for a song here, we want to be able to tap on one of these songs and actually get the player presenting. So that's going to be in, I believe, so in search results controller, we actually call it a delegate when we tap on one of those cells, and we actually defer back to the search controller. So in search controller, that's going to be under track, which is right here. And what we can actually do is say playback presenter, start playback. And this model that we're passing back is already a track. So we can go ahead and just pass it in. So now if we go ahead and run our app from any place that we tap on a row that represents a song, you should see that new, the presenter presented for playback. So there's a album example. Let's come down here and go to a playlist. We can tap on the green button, and looks like that one's not actually working. So let's see why that's not working. We might have actually forgot to hook up the actual button here. So let's jump into, I think it's called playlist header view or something like that. We called it playlist header view collection reusable view. We have a delegate here. Let's see if we ever hooked it up. All right, bear with me. Looks like we did. Did we ever hook up our call here? Looks like we hooked this up as well. Interesting. So let's see why this is not working. So we should be, let me try it with one of them. So this is a playlist, I believe. And when we tap on this, something should present. The other thing we might have forgot to do is actually hook up the presenter. That's what we forgot to hook up. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that there, creating the player view controller and presenting it. Go ahead and give it a run again. Let's go into one of these playlists and hit the green button, and boom, we get the screen that's going to show our playback. And let me also try it for a search result. So let me search for a song. Let's search for a song by Drake. Let's go ahead and hit this, and you'll see the presenter. We can swipe it away when we're done with that screen. So I know I started this video by saying we're going to do the UI, even though we just did everything but the UI. But now that we actually have a controller presenting, let's go ahead and build out the user interface there. So now that's going to be in controllers, And what did I call it? I think I called it player view controller. And let's go ahead and first and foremost, we're going to say view did layout subviews, super view did layout subviews. And you can go ahead and build all your views in this controller, or what you can go ahead and do is you can segment them out. And I think what we're going to want to go ahead and do is segment out the album artwork, which will be the kind of top half of the controller, and the bottom half, which is going to be our player controls view. So let's go ahead and just add a single view on here, which is going to be a private let image view. And this is going to be an image view. And I'm going to give this a background color so we can actually see this image view while we're just building out the UI. We're not going to actually play back in this video. That'll be the next one where we hook up the data source for this. But we do first want to hook up like all of the UI components and views that will receive the information about the thing that's being played back. So there is our image view. We're going to go ahead and add this as a sub view. We probably also want to say content mode is scale aspect to fill so it doesn't get distorted or anything weird like that. And let's go ahead and lay this out. So what I'm going to say is we'll lay this out and we'll say image view dot frame is going to be cg rect x 0, 0. We'll say view dot width, and the height will also be view dot width. And now that I think about it, we probably want 3 dots up here and a close button. So we're going to go back to the presenter, and instead of presenting this view controller directly, what we're going to actually go ahead and do is we're going to present this view controller wrapped in a navigation controller, passing in VC, just like that. Do the same thing for the bottom there. We might actually consolidate this code since it's starting to look a little redundant. But for this one here, let's also go ahead and say the title is going to be the track.name. And we also want to go ahead and configure buttons at the top left and top right here in the bar. But instead of doing that here, what we can go and do is we can do that in the player controller itself. So we're going to say configure bar buttons. And let's go ahead and add this function at the bottom here. And let's go ahead and set those left and right buttons. So we'll say navigation item. We're going to assign its left button, which will be a UI bar button item with a, we're going to use a bar button style system item. And I think we're going to stick with close. We'll do self. And the action is going to be did tap close. Pretty simple. And let's see, we're going to go ahead and define this selector down here. All right, pretty simple. And in here, we want to actually just go ahead and say dismiss the current controller with an animated completion is nil. And then we also want the right bar button item. And this one is going to be an action. I think that's one of the options here, an action. And we're going to go ahead and say this is did tap action. And what actions is going to do is bring up a action sheet, as the name implies, and give us, potential actions. Maybe we want to let the user share the song, or maybe add it to a playlist. Both are pretty, good options to add and give to the user. So we'll leave it as is for now and not really implement that here. But let's go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. And let's see if our UI changes are reflected. So on browse here, we'll go and tap on one of these songs. And we see here the blue is actually underneath the navigation bar, which we don't want. And I think I forgot in my copy and paste that this one should be the right bar button item. Let's also go ahead and fix up the Y position here for the image view. This should be view.safeAreaInsets.top. That way it's going to respect the top inset for the navigation bar. Let's go ahead and present it. So image view looking good. Now we want to go ahead and have the bottom half here, which is going to consist of our previous, pause play, and forward buttons, as well as potentially a volume slider. We're not going to do a scrubber so where you can quickly move between the track. We're going to do a volume slider instead. But we also want labels down here for the name, the artist, whose song is playing, and if that song belongs to a playlist or album as well. So like I said, we're going to have a separate view where we're going to abstract all that stuff. So we're going to go ahead and create a view in our views folder. And this is going to be a simple UI view. We're just going to create it in a Swift file. I'm going to go ahead and call this player controls view, even though it has more than just the player controls, but pretty good name in my opinion. Let's go ahead and import UIKit first and foremost. Go ahead and create this player controls view. It's going to subclass UI view. And let's see, let's go ahead and bring in the initializer, which has a frame as one of the parameters here, like that. We also want the required initializer with the coder, which we'll just say fatal error in. And let's see, we are also going to want layout subview since we're going to have subviews to lay out. Let's go ahead and hit Command B. I'm just going to start by setting its background color here to be red so we can actually see it. And let's go ahead and actually add it to our UI here so we have something concrete to visualize. And then we'll start building out that view. So right here, we are going to just create this view. We'll say private let controls view, I guess we can call it, as the instance name. And this will just be that view we created. And let's go ahead and add this as a sub view. We'll say view, add subview. And we want to go ahead and just give it a frame. So we'll say the frame here is CZRect. X will be perhaps, we'll say 10 just to give it some buffer. The Y will be image view dot bottom plus 10. Width will be view.width subtracting 20 for that centered buffer. And the height is going to be view dot height subtracting a couple things. So first we're going to subtract the image view dot height. We are also going to subtract the safe area insets for the view dot top. We'll subtract the view's safe area insets dot bottom. And I'm also going to subtract a 15-point buffer between the image at the top as well as this view. Let's go ahead and just line break all this stuff so we can get a little bit better legibility here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm also going to hit Control I to align it. Go ahead and hit Command R, and let's see if we see our red bottom view on that player. All right, let's go ahead and click that. And there is our red view. You can see that it's red currently. And of course, it's not flush to the edges of the screen. That's by design, like I did there. So we have a little bit of a nicer buffer to play with. So let's go ahead and add the UI in here. So we want a UI slider. We want 2 labels and 3 buttons. So let's go ahead and create all of those. So in here, let's go ahead and create those subviews. So we're first going to have a slider, which will be a volume slider. And we'll call this a UI slider. And we're going to say let slider is a UI slider. We're going to return the slider here. And by default, we will say that the value of this is 0.5. So it's 50% full. And I don't think we need to change the color or anything. The default is perfectly fine. The next thing that we want are 2 labels. So first we're going to say let's name label, which will be the name of the song. It's going to be a simple UI label. We're going to go ahead and just give it a more prominent font size in a moment here. We'll say return label. Label dot, we'll say number of lines is 1. Also say label dot font is going to be system font of size. Let's do 20 with a weight of perhaps semi-bold. We're also going to want a secondary label, which I'm just going to call a subtitle label because we're going to repurpose this label based on if it's a playlist or an album. And the only difference here is the font size, we're going to say in this case is going to be 18, and the weight will be regular. And the other thing we're going to go ahead and do is say label.text color is going to be the secondary label semantic color. And let's see, those are our labels. Now we also want 3 buttons. So first up is going to be the back button. Maybe that's not the best name, but we'll stick with that for now. So back button like that. So we're going to say this is a pretty standard button. To get the image for the actual button, we will be leveraging SF symbols since it has a back image kind of built in already. So we're going to say the tint color, however, is label. So it'll be black if it's in light mode and white if it's in light mode, or white rather if it's in dark mode. And let's see, we're going to say button set image. And this is the image that we want to go ahead and set for the normal state. This image is going to be a UI image with a system name. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is open up SF symbols so we can find that image name. I think it's called something like previous or back or something, but we'll look for it here. I'm going to search for previous, and it looks like that doesn't exist. We'll search for back. And there's quite a few back arrows here. The one that we probably want, I guess we can say it's either this one or this one. It's really subjective. We'll just say backward.fill. You can select it and hit Command-Shift-C to copy the name. I'll drop it in right there. We're also going to say with configuration, and this is going to be UI image symbol configuration. And this allows us to change the font size and the weight and whatnot of the actual image. So I'm going to say point size of this will be 34, and we'll say this is regular for the actual weight. So to simplify our lives, we are going to copy this, paste it a total of 2 more times. This next one here is going to be a forward button. And this last one here will be the play pause button. So the play pause button by default is going to show a pause icon because we're going to autoplay once the player launches. So let's go ahead and search for pause in here. So we'll find this one here. So let's change the name of this SF symbol. And this other one, I have a feeling it is called next.fill. Maybe not. So let's see, forward.fill. We probably want, we did backwards.fill, so forward.fill is probably what we want. So we have forward arrows. I think the one that we want is this right here. It's basically the inverse of the other one we copied before. Let's go ahead and paste that in right there, forward.fill. And now we have all of our UI components for this view. Let's go ahead and add all of them as subviews. So the first one we're going to do are the labels. We'll say this is name label. Next one will be subtitle label. Next one will be the volume slider. And then we have 3 buttons. So we're going to go ahead and say this is backward button, or what did I call it? Back button. The next one is going to be the next button, or did I not rename it? Let's see what we called it. We called it forward button. Let's call it next so it matches the naming convention that I kind of went with here. This one will be next button. And this final one will be play pause button. So there are our buttons, label, and the volume slider. I'm also going to say on here, clips to bounds true, just in case anything overflows the edges of the actual view. We're going to want to do layout subviews in a second here. Let's think about what it's going to look like. So let's go back to our simulator. We want the labels at the top. So the name label, the album, and then we want the slider, then the play pause in the middle, and then forward and backwards is pretty simple, left and right of it. So let's start with name label dot frame is going to be CG rect. And we'll say here X is 0, Y is 0, width is width, and we'll say height is 50. Go ahead and paste that, and we're going to do the next label, which is going to be right below it. The only thing that changes now is Y will be name label dot bottom plus 10. And what we're actually assigning now is going to be the subtitle label. So there are our labels. Then we want to do the volume slider. Its frame is going to be CG rect. The X is going to be, let's say 10. Y will be subtitle label dot bottom plus 20. Width will be width subtracting 20. So we have a 10-point buffer on each side. And the height will be 44, which is the standard for a volume slider. And finally, we got our buttons. So for our buttons, we are going to first do the play pause button, since it's probably the easiest, and we can do every other button in relation to this one. Now, the button size is going to be standard. So let me go ahead and create a single button size constant right up here to make our lives a little easier. Let's go ahead and go with 60, and we can always bump this up if need be. So now that we have this, we can say the X is going to be width, subtracting the button size divided by 2, so it's centered. The Y is going to be the volume slider plus some buffer. So we'll say volume slider bottom plus, let's say 30. And we'll see if our calculation makes sense in terms of vertical centered look and feel. And now what I'm going to do is let's do the back button dot frame. This one is going to be relational to the play pause. So the X is going to be place pause button dot left, subtracting, let's say maybe, I don't know, maybe 80, kind of making that up. The Y will be play pause button dot top, so same Y position. And this is going to be button size. And the next one will also be button size. Whoops, that's not what we want. Let me copy and paste that again. Let's try that one more time. We'll say button size. And the reason it's giving us a hard time is because I spelled button size wrong. So let me fix that. Button size is going to be button size for the width and height for both of these. So that one's button size. This one's button size, that is button size. And finally, this width is also button size. And last one we need is the next button. Let me make sure nothing's screwed up here. So we have button size. Looks like we have an error here. Let's see what I messed up. Cannot find button size. I think we need to fix this one too. Button size. This one is going to now be the next button. And the only thing that changes is the X. So we're going to say the play button right at this point plus 80. So I know we typed out a bunch of code, but let's just run it. And then I'll briefly, re-talk through how we calculated all this stuff. If anything is wrong or broken, we'll fix that. Looks like something is broken already. So let's see what that item is. Looks like it's something in here. We added a weird R right there. It's a typo. Go ahead and give that a delete. Give it a run one more time. There is our simulator. And we're going to tap on one of these songs, and this is what we've got. So looks like our pause button is placed correctly, but looks like our back button is kind of incorrect. So the calculation actually makes sense. We just did it incorrectly. So the back button's X here should not only be the play button left minus 80, but we should also say minus button size because the X is the left origin of a frame. So we need to also subtract the width of the frame we're trying to lay out. So if we try that one more time, we'll see that these are more equally spaced out. I think the sizing is good. You might want to actually bump up this pause a little bit, but a little subjective. The slider looks good. Let's go ahead and add some text for the labels here so we can see something. So I'm going to go ahead and say for this name label, we're just going to say, this is my song, and it's going to be by, let's say, Drake featuring some other artist. Go ahead and give that a run. And let's see, what did I screw up in typing this out? Let's see. We forgot the closing quotes. Let's go ahead and put that there. Give it a run. And let's see what that looks like. I think we also want a circle behind. Okay, so these two are looking great. We also want a circle behind the actual play pause button here. But the first thing we'll actually do is let's go ahead back to our player view controller. Once again, Command Shift O to open this up. And let's get rid of the red background color. Actually, I think we did it in that other view, not in the controller. So come back to the view, and in the initializer, you can go ahead and say the background color is clear, and go ahead and give that a run. Let's see what that looks like without the color. Sometimes without the color, things look a little weird, so we might want to tweak it. So I think that looks pretty good. The pause button I still think is a little small and it's bugging me, but I'm going to leave that as is. But that's basically it. So our actual album artwork would come here in this case, the name of the song here and the artist there. Now, we could go ahead and put these two labels closer together, but I like how they're pretty evenly spaced out. We don't have anything obstructing down here. User can easily tap on these. One thing that we will add in our view, because our controller is responsible for things like, going and, getting the next song or the previous song or kicking off the play or pause operation, we need to have a delegate in this view to relay the button taps to our controller. So I'm going to create a protocol up here, and we're going to say it is a player control view delegate. And we're essentially going to have three functions in here for the three buttons that we have. And they're going to be the common naming convention for delegate functions. So we'll say player controls view, did tap play pause, and it's going to pass in a a view. I'll call it player controls view, and its type will be players control view. Go ahead and copy and paste that, and this one's going to be did tap forward button, and this one will be did tap backwards button. And I guess we'll say this was did tap play pause button. And what we'll now be able to do is on this actual view, we can say weak var delegate is our player controls view delegate. To hold this protocol in a weak capacity, you need to also be inheriting or rather extending any object, and go ahead and make this guy optional. And now we can actually add targets to our buttons here in the initializer and actually go through the delegate back to the controller who will be assigning it. So I'm going to say back button, add targets is going to be self. The action is going to be did tap back. The event will be touch up inside. Go ahead and copy and paste that. This one is going to be did tap next. This one will be did tap play pause. And just go ahead and change the buttons you're assigning it on. This is going to be next button. This will be play pause button. And the reason we have all these weird looking errors is because we need to define these functions. So I'm going to create them right down here, and all three of them will be private. So this will be did tap back. Let's go ahead and copy and paste that. And the next one here is going to be did tap next. And this one will be did tap play pause. Hopefully we don't have any typos. I'll check in just a moment. All right, looks like those errors should go away. Hopefully, yep, they went away. Now in these functions, we can say delegate, did tap, what do we call it? Did tap backwards, passing in self. And this one can be delegate. And this one is did tap forwards, passing in self, which is the view that is invoking the delegate. And this one is did tap play pause, once again, passing in self. Now you might be wondering, how do we actually get these calls back out to our controller? And we actually, I think, did this elsewhere in the app, but we can now jump to the player view controller. And we go ahead and view did load. We already have an instance of this controls view. In view did load, what we can say is we can say controls view dot delegate is self. And we can just conform to this protocol here. I'm going to do it in an extension to just keep the organization of the code clean here. We'll say this player controller conforms to the player controls view delegate. And we'll go ahead and hit let me go ahead and hit that error that we had. We can hit fix and it'll stub out the three functions that we created. And here we can actually go ahead and perform the actions. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up the video here, since we're getting pretty close into passing data into this player as well as playing the audio. We'll talk about the fact that the playback will actually be handled by the playback presenter and not the controller in the next video. So that's all I've got for you guys for this one. If you haven't liked the video yet, make sure to do so. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions, errors, concerns, and definitely don't forget to subscribe to the channel for daily uploads. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next part.